Listen to me carefully. Right now, at this very moment, there is a thought trying to enter your mind that you must reject. I'm not talking about tomorrow. I'm not talking about next week. I'm talking about right now. And the decision you make about that thought in the next few seconds will determine whether you move forward into your destiny or remain trapped in the prison of your current circumstances. Your future is not being shaped by what you are doing. Your future is being shaped by what you are thinking. And more importantly, your future is being determined by the thoughts you have. The courage to refuse. You see, most people believe that success is about action, about doing more, working harder, pushing further. But I have discovered something that changed my entire life. Success begins with rejection. Success begins when you learn to say no to the right things in your mind. Let me tell you something that might shock you. You are not responsible for every thought that comes to your mind. Did you hear what I just said? You are not responsible for every thought that knocks on the door of your consciousness. Thoughts come from everywhere. They come from your past, from your environment, from people around you, from the media, from your fears, from your disappointments. These thoughts arrive uninvited, like strangers knocking on your door at midnight. But here is where your power lies. You may not control what thoughts knock on your door, but you absolutely control which ones you invite inside. You control which ones you give a seat at the table of your mind. You control which ones you feed and entertain and allow to stay. And I want to tell you something that will change your life if you really grasp it. The thoughts you refuse to entertain are more important than the thoughts you accept. Let me say that again, because this is the key to everything. The thoughts you refuse are more important than the thoughts you accept. Most people spend their entire lives trying to think positive thoughts. They wake up and try to pump themselves up with affirmations and motivational quotes, and that's good, that has value. But what they don't understand is that the battle is not won by what you think. The battle is won by what you refuse to think. The battle is won by the thoughts you reject before they take root in the soil of your soul. I have seen brilliant people destroy their destiny because they entertained one wrong thought for too long. I have watched talented individuals with unlimited potential end up living mediocre lives because they allowed a single destructive thought to build a home in their mind. And I have also witnessed ordinary people with average skills rise to extraordinary heights because they developed the discipline to refuse thoughts that did not serve their future. Your mind is not a garbage dump where any thought can come and settle. Your mind is sacred ground. Your mind is the garden where your future is growing right now, even as I speak to these words to you. And just like a gardener must be ruthless with weeds, you must be ruthless with thoughts that will choke the life out of your dreams. You see, a gardener does not negotiate with weeds. A gardener does not have a conversation with thorns. A gardener does not give weeds a chance to explain themselves. The moment a gardener sees a weed, he pulls it out by the root. That is exactly how you must treat toxic thoughts. The moment they appear, you pull them out. No negotiation, no entertainment, no second chances. I want to share something with you from my own journey. There was a time in my life when I almost lost everything because I entertained the wrong thoughts. I was young, ambitious, full of vision. I could see my future so clearly it was like watching a movie in my mind. But then something happened. Failure came. Disappointment knocked on my door. People I trusted betrayed me. Opportunities I counted on fell apart. And with each disappointment, a thought would come. The thought said, maybe you're not who you think you are. Maybe this dream is too big for someone like you. Maybe you should just accept a smaller life, a safer life, a more realistic life. At first, I rejected these thoughts immediately, but disappointment is persistent, and these thoughts kept coming back, knocking louder each time. And one day, I was tired, I was weary, I was wounded, and I made a mistake. I let that thought come inside. I gave it a seat. I let it speak. And once I gave it permission to speak, it started to multiply. One thought of doubt became two thoughts. 2 became 4. 4 became 8. Before I knew it, my entire mind was occupied by an army of thoughts telling me to quit, to settle, to accept defeat. And that's when I realized something profound. Asterisk, asterisk. The battlefield of destiny is always in the mind first. Asterisk, asterisk. Before you ever lose in reality, you lose in your thoughts. Before you ever quit in the physical realm, you surrender in the mental realm. The enemy knows this. That's why he doesn't attack your circumstances. First, he attacks your times, thinking times about your circumstances. I remember standing in my bathroom one morning, looking at myself in the mirror, and I heard this voice, not audible but clear as day, saying, "Who do you think you are? Look at where you came from. Look at your limitations. Look at your past failures." And in that moment, I had a choice. I could agree with that voice. I could let it define my reality, or I could recognize it for what it was. Asterisk, asterisk, a strategic assault on my identity. Asterisk, asterisk. See, when the enemy can get you to question who you are, he can control what you attempt. When he can get you to forget whose you are, he can determine where you end up. But here's the principle that changed everything for me. Asterisk, asterisk. You don't have to entertain every thought that knocks on the door of your mind. Asterisk, asterisk. Just because a thought shows up doesn't mean you have to invite it in, offer it coffee, and let it stay for dinner. You have authority over your thought life. You were given a will. You were given the power to choose what you meditate on. The scripture says, "Cast down imaginations and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God." Notice it didn't say ignore them. It didn't say pretend they're not there. It said asterisk, asterisk, cast them down, asterisk, asterisk. That's a violent word. That's an aggressive word. That means you actively, forcefully reject thoughts that contradict your purpose. I started doing this. Every time a negative thought came, I would literally speak out loud, yes, out loud, and say, "No, that's not who I am. That's not what God said about me. That thought has no authority here." People thought I was losing my mind, but I was actually finding times it. And here's the beautiful part. The more you do it, the stronger your authority becomes. It's like building muscle. The first time you lift weights, it's hard. Your arms shake. You want to quit. But you keep showing up, and eventually, what once felt impossible becomes effortless. Your spiritual authority works the same way. The first time you stand up to a negative thought, it feels awkward. You second guess yourself. Am I really doing this? Am I just talking to myself? But you do it anyway. And the next time, it gets easier. And the time after that, it becomes natural. Eventually, you don't even have to think about it. You just automatically reject anything that contradicts God's word. I remember when financial pressure tried to overwhelm me. The bills piled up, the bank account looked empty, and fear whispered, "You're going under, you'll never make it." I could have agreed. I could have panicked, complained, declared poverty over my life. But instead, I opened my mouth and said, "No. My God supplies all my needs according to his riches in glory. He makes a way where there is no way. I am blessed to be a blessing. I walk in abundance, not lack." Did the bills disappear instantly? No. But something shifted in the spiritual realm. Doors opened. Opportunities appeared. Provision came from unexpected places. Why? Because I exercised my authority. See, when you speak God's word over your situation, you're not just making positive affirmations, you're releasing divine power. You're aligning yourself with heaven's reality. You're giving God something to work with. Faith gives God permission to move in your life, and your words are the vehicle of that faith. The Bible says, life and death are in the power of the tongue. That's not poetry, that's physics. That's how the kingdom operates. You literally create your future with your words. Think about that. Every word you speak is a seed, and you're planting those seeds every single day. The question is, what kind of harvest are you planting for? Are you planting seeds of defeat? I'll never change, this is just how I am, nothing good ever happens to me. Or are you planting seeds of victory? I am who God says I am. I can do what God says I can do. I have what God says I have. The choice is yours. But understand this, you cannot plant corn and expect to harvest wheat. You cannot speak death and expect to live in abundance. Your mouth must match your faith. The law of the harvest operates on the principle of consistency. You see, the farmer doesn't plant his seed with doubt. He doesn't dig up the soil every morning to check if something's growing. No, he plants with expectation. He waters with faith. He protects his field with conviction. And when the appointed season comes, he reaps. Your words are your seeds, and your life is the field. What you've been speaking over yourself for the past year, that's what's about to break through the soil. If you've been saying, "I'll never amount to anything," then friend, you've planted failure. If you've been declaring, "I'm broke, I'm sick, I'm defeated," congratulations, you're about to harvest exactly what you planted. But here's the beautiful part. Here's where grace intersects with law. Today is a new planting season. Right now, this very moment, you can change your harvest by changing your seed. You can begin to speak life. You can begin to declare the promises that have been given to you. I've watched this principle transform nations. When I work with leaders across the globe, the first thing I address is not their economy or their policy, it's their language. Because a leader who speaks defeat will govern defeat. A president who declares impossibility will administrate impossibility. But a leader who speaks vision, who declares purpose, who pronounces destiny, that leader shapes the future, and you are the leader of your life. You are the president of your own potential. What are you declaring over your territory? Let me ask you something penetrating. When you look in the mirror in the morning, what do you say? Because that conversation, that daily dialogue with yourself is more powerful than any speech you'll hear from a stage. You are your own most influential preacher. You listen to yourself more than you listen to anyone else. And here's what I need you to understand. If you're going to be your own most influential voice, then you'd better make sure that voice is speaking truth. You'd better make sure that voice is speaking life. You'd better make sure that voice is speaking possibility and not limitation. Because I've watched too many brilliant people destroy themselves with their own words. I've counseled men and women who had everything they needed to succeed, the education, the opportunity, the support system, but they talked themselves right out of their destiny. Every morning they woke up and preached a sermon of defeat to themselves. I can't do this, I'm not smart enough, I always mess things up, nothing ever works out for me. And guess what? They became living testimonies to their own negative prophecies. You see, your words don't just describe your reality, they create it. This is a fundamental principle that most people miss. We think words are just sounds we make to communicate information, but words are seeds. Every word you speak is a seed planted in the soil of your future, and whatever you plant, you will harvest. Think about a farmer for a moment. If a farmer plants corn seeds, does he expect to harvest tomatoes? Of course not. That would be insane. But we do this very thing with our words every single day. We plant seeds of doubt, fear, and negativity. Then we wonder why our lives aren't producing confidence, courage, and success. We plant criticism and complaint. Then we're surprised when we harvest bitterness and frustration. I want you to become a careful gardener of your words. I want you to examine what you've been planting. Because if you don't like what's growing in your life right now, I guarantee you it started with what you were speaking 6 months ago, a year ago, 5 years ago. And this is especially critical when nobody else is listening. This is about those private conversations, the ones you have in your car, in the shower, lying in bed at night. What are you saying to yourself in those moments? Are you rehearsing your failures or declaring your possibilities? Are you replaying every mistake or speaking your next level of growth? I learned this principle the hard way. There was a season in my life when I found myself repeating a particular phrase. I'm so tired. I'm exhausted. I can't keep up. I said it so often it became my greeting. People would ask how I was doing, and before I could think, those words would tumble out. And you know what happened? I became more tired. My body heard what my mouth was saying and agreed with it. I had to learn to stop confessing weakness and start speaking life. I had to discipline my mouth. Because your body is listening to your words. Your cells respond to the frequency of your vocabulary. Medical science is now catching up to what the Bible said thousands of years ago, that there is power in the tongue. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. So I changed what I said. Instead of I'm so tired, I started saying, I'm getting stronger every day. My body is renewing itself. I am full of energy and vitality. And you know what? Things began to shift. Not overnight, but gradually. Systematically, my body began to respond to a new set of instructions. Your words are programming your future. Every time you speak, you're either building or demolishing. You're either planting seeds of victory or watering weeds of defeat. And here's the critical thing most people miss. It's not just about positive thinking. This isn't some fluffy motivation. This is about aligning your words with God's word, with truth, with the design embedded in your DNA. Listen carefully. You were created in the image of a speaking God. He spoke, and worlds came into existence. You have that same creative capacity in your speech, not because you're God, but because you're made in His image. Your words carry weight in the spiritual realm. They set things in motion. They release forces you cannot see, but that are absolutely real. I've watched people heal themselves with their words. I've seen businesses turn around when the owner stopped speaking bankruptcy and started speaking abundance. I've witnessed marriages restored when couples changed their vocabulary from blame to blessing. This isn't theory. This is observable, repeatable reality. But you've got to be consistent. You can't speak life on Sunday and death all week. You can't declare victory in church and then spend the rest of your time rehearsing your problems to everyone who'll listen. Your mouth must become a disciplined instrument of your destiny, not a megaphone for your misery. I've watched people sabotage their breakthrough with their own testimonies. They'll tell you about every closed door, every rejection letter, every person who didn't believe in them. They've perfected the narrative of their struggle, but never rehearsed the script of their success. Listen to me, your testimony should point to where you're going, not just where you've been. When someone asks how you're doing, you've got to learn to speak from your future, not just report from your past. I'm blessed and highly favored. Isn't denial, it's declaration. It's you choosing to align your mouth with God's promises rather than your present circumstances. This is not about lying or pretending problems don't exist. This is about refusing to give your problems the final word. The Bible says life and death are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit. Notice it says those who love it. That means there are people who actually love death speaking. They're addicted to complaining. They feel more comfortable in conversation when they're sharing bad news. They've built their identity around being the victim, the overlooked, the struggling one. And beloved, you cannot carry that identity into your destiny. You've got to fall in love with life speaking. You've got to develop a craving for words that build, that create, that prophesy your future into existence. When you wake up in the morning, before you check your phone, before you see what's trending, before you hear the news, speak life. Speak to your day. Command it to align with heaven's agenda for you. I'm not talking about some mystical formula. I'm talking about practical, intentional, disciplined speech. When you look at your bank account and it's not where you want it to be, don't curse it. Speak to it. You are the seed for my harvest. Provision is coming. I am a steward of abundance. When you look at your body and it's not healthy, don't just complain about it. Speak to it. Body, you will serve me in fulfilling my assignment. Strength is being renewed. Health is manifesting. Some of you think I've lost my mind, but I'm teaching you what Jesus taught. He spoke to fig trees, to storms, to dead bodies. He understood that words are the bridge between the invisible realm and the visible one. Your words don't just describe reality, they create it. This is why the Bible says that life and death are in the power of the tongue. Not life and death are affected by the tongue. Not life and death are influenced by the tongue. They are in the power of the tongue. Your tongue holds the seeds of both outcomes, and whichever one you water with your words will grow. You see, most people use their words to describe their circumstances. I'm broke, I'm sick, I'm alone, I'm stuck, I'm limited. And then they wonder why nothing changes. You've just created a contract with your circumstances. You've just used the authority you were given to lock yourself into your current condition. But when you understand the principle of calling those things that are not as though they were, everything shifts. You stop being a reporter of your situation and become a prophet of your destiny. You start speaking what should be instead of what is. You start declaring the end from the beginning. Abraham didn't wait until Sarah was pregnant to call himself a father of many nations. God changed his name, and Abraham started speaking it over himself daily, even when his body was as good as dead. Even when Sarah was barren and beyond childbearing years, he spoke what God said, not what he saw. This is not denial. This is not ignoring reality. This is understanding which reality is more real, the temporary circumstances you see or the eternal promise God spoke. Which realm will you give your allegiance to? When you're sick, you don't deny the symptoms, but you don't give them authority over your future either. You speak healing. You speak wholeness. You speak the promise. You align your mouth with heaven instead of with your condition. When your bank account is empty, you don't lie about it. But you don't prophesy poverty either. You speak provision. You speak abundance. You speak multiplication. You call forth the resources that already exist in the unseen realm. This is not positive thinking. This is creative declaration. This is partnering with the way God designed the universe to function. He set up a system where words carry weight, where faith gives substance to things hoped for, where the invisible becomes visible through the portal of human speech aligned with divine truth. And here's what most people miss. God doesn't just want you to declare truth once and walk away. He wants you to live in a continuous state of creative declaration. This isn't a one-time prayer, it's a lifestyle. It's waking up every morning and speaking life over your circumstances before your feet hit the floor. It's looking at an empty bank account and declaring provision instead of panic. It's facing a diagnosis and speaking health instead of accepting defeat. I've watched people transform their entire existence simply by changing what comes out of their mouths. I knew a businessman who was drowning in debt, his company on the verge of bankruptcy. Everyone around him was speaking failure, his accountant, his partners, even his family. But he made a decision. Every single day, he would walk through his empty office and declare, "This business is blessed. Creativity flows through this place. Solutions are coming. I am a conduit of divine wisdom." People thought he'd lost his mind. But within 18 months, he had not only recovered but expanded into 3 new markets. Was it just positive thinking? No. It was aligning his words with kingdom principles. It was refusing to let the visible dictate his vocabulary. It was understanding that he had been given authority to speak into the chaos of his circumstances and call forth order. You see, the enemy knows the power of your words. That's why he works overtime to get you speaking doubt, fear, limitation, and impossibility. Every time you say, "I can't," you're creating barriers. Every time you declare it's impossible, you're building walls. Every time you speak defeat, you're actually partnering with the very thing that's trying to destroy you. But when you begin to speak what God says about you, when you declare that you are more than a conqueror, that no weapon formed against you shall prosper, that the same Spirit that raised Christ from the dead lives in you, you shift the entire atmosphere around your life. You're not just being optimistic. You're engaging the creative power that spoke galaxies into existence. Your words don't just describe your reality, they create it. And that's why Satan fights so hard to control your vocabulary. He knows that as long as he can keep you speaking defeat, you'll live in defeat. As long as he can keep you confessing lack, you'll experience lack. As long as he can keep you declaring sickness, you'll manifest sickness. Think about the children of Israel at the edge of the promised land. 12 spies went in to scout the territory. They all saw the same land, they all saw the same giants, they all encountered the same challenges. But 10 came back and said, "We are like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight." Notice the progression. They saw themselves as grasshoppers first, and then the giants saw them that way too. Your self-perception determines how the world perceives you. But Joshua and Caleb had a different report. They said, "We are well able to overcome it." Same land, same giants, different confession. And guess what? Only those 2 out of that entire generation of adults made it into the promise. Your words don't just reflect your future, they determine it. I've watched this principle play out countless times. I've seen people with terminal diagnoses outlive their prognosis because they refuse to speak death over themselves. I've seen businesses on the brink of collapse turn around because the leader changed the narrative they were speaking. I've seen marriages restored because couples stopped prophesying divorce and started declaring covenant. Here's what most people miss. You are always prophesying. Every word you speak is a prophecy. When you say, "I'll never get out of debt," that's a prophecy. When you say, "I always get sick during flu season," that's a prophecy. When you say, "Nobody in my family ever succeeds," that's a prophecy. And the tragedy is, you're anointed enough to make your prophecies come true. God has given you creative authority in the earth. Your tongue is the rudder of your life ship. James chapter 3 tells us that though the tongue is a small member, it boasts great things. A small fire kindles a great forest. Your words are creating forests, forests of blessing or forests of destruction. The question is, what kind of forest are you planting with your mouth today? You see, I've traveled to over 70 nations, and everywhere I go, I meet people who are living beneath their words. They've spoken themselves into corners they can't escape. They've prophesied their own limitations. And here's what breaks my heart. They don't even realize they're doing it. I remember counseling a young entrepreneur in Singapore. Brilliant mind, incredible vision. But every time he talked about his business, he would say, I'm trying to make it work. Not I'm building something extraordinary. Not I'm creating solutions, just trying. That one word became a self-fulfilling prophecy. Within 18 months, his business collapsed. When we met again, you know what he said? I tried, but it didn't work out. He got exactly what he declared. Contrast that with a woman I met in South Africa. She had nothing, and I mean nothing. Living in a tin shack in one of the townships. But when she spoke about her future, fire came out of her mouth. I am an entrepreneur. I am a solution provider. I am changing my community. No trying, no hoping. She declared who she was before she had any evidence. Today, she employs 43 people and has built a manufacturing business that serves 3 provinces. Same country, different words, different destiny. This is the mystery most people miss. You don't speak about what you see. You speak to create what you want to see. Abraham didn't wait until he had children to call himself the father of nations. He started calling himself that when his body was as good as dead. That's the power of faith-filled words they create, the future they describe. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. If someone recorded every word you spoke for the past 30 days and played it back to you, would you be proud of what you heard? Would those words match the future you claim you want? Or would you discover that you've been sabotaging your own destiny with your mouth? You see, most people don't realize they're living in a prison they built with their own vocabulary. They're trapped behind bars made of I can't, I'm not, and it's impossible. And here's the tragedy. They've been in that cell so long, they've forgotten what freedom even looks like. I've watched this happen over and over again. Brilliant people, gifted people, people with incredible potential, sitting in the poverty of their own words. They'll tell you about all the reasons why their dreams can't happen. They've got a PhD in excuses and a master's degree in limitations. They can explain in eloquent detail why success is for other people, why their circumstances are different, why the odds are against them. But let me tell you what I've discovered after decades of studying successful people across every field imaginable. The ones who break through, the ones who transform their reality, the ones who leave a legacy, they all have one thing in common. They changed their vocabulary before their circumstances changed. Think about that. They didn't wait for their bank account to look different before they spoke differently. They didn't wait for opportunities to show up before they started declaring them. They understood something profound. The words you speak today are the building materials for your tomorrow. I remember working with a young man who came to me completely defeated. He'd failed at 3 businesses, lost everything. He sat in my office and said, "Dr. Munroe, I'm just not cut out for success. I'm a failure. That's who I am." I stopped him right there. I said, "No, you're not a failure. You had 3 businesses that didn't work, but you're not your results. You're still here. You're still breathing. You still have time. Now, what are you going to say about your future?" He looked at me confused, so I explained it this way. Right now, you're introducing yourself by your past. Every time you say, "I am a failure," you're inviting failure to stay in your life. You're giving it a permanent address. But what if you started introducing yourself by your future instead? That conversation changed his trajectory. He started speaking differently. Instead of "I'm a failure," he began saying, "I'm learning, I'm growing, I'm building something sustainable." Within 2 years, he had a thriving business. Not because circumstances magically changed, but because he changed the atmosphere around his life with his words. Now, I want to bring this closer to home. Let me ask you something personal. What conversation are you having with yourself right now about your own life? Not the one you have with other people, the one you have when you're alone. When the lights are off and it's just you and your thoughts, what are you saying? Are you saying, "I'll never get out of this"? Are you saying, "This is just how my family is"? Are you saying, "I'm too old, too young, too broken, too far behind"? Because if you are, you need to understand something. You're not describing your reality, you're creating it. Your words are seeds. And seeds don't care about your feelings. They don't care if you're having a bad day. They just do what seeds do. They grow, they multiply, they produce after their kind. If you plant apple seeds, you get apples. If you plant words of defeat, you get a life of defeat. It's agricultural law applied to the spiritual realm. So here's what I want you to do. Starting today, I want you to become intentional about your vocabulary. I want you to start monitoring what comes out of your mouth like you monitor your bank account. Because truthfully, your words are more valuable than your money. Money can be replaced, but years lost to negative confession, those don't come back. Stop saying you're broke. Say you're in transition. Stop saying you're stuck. Say you're being positioned. Stop saying it's impossible. Say you're waiting for strategy. Do you see what's happening? You're not lying. You're not pretending problems don't exist. You're reframing them with the vocabulary of faith. Because here's what happens when you change your vocabulary. You change your vision. And when you change your vision, you change your future. I've watched this transformation in my own life. There was a season when I would look at obstacles and my first response was to name the problem. This is impossible. The resources aren't there. The timing is wrong. And you know what? As long as I spoke that language, I remained stuck in that reality. But when I began to shift my confession, when I started saying, this challenge has been permitted to reveal the provision that's already available to me. This delay is positioning me for a greater yes. This closed door is protecting me from a lesser destiny. Everything shifted. The circumstances didn't immediately change, but I changed. My perspective transformed, and eventually the external reality began to align with the internal declaration. You see, words create worlds. The moment you begin to speak differently about your situation, you step into a different dimension of possibility. Your mouth is the gateway between the invisible realm and the visible manifestation. Think about it. God himself created the entire universe with words. He didn't think the world into existence. He didn't wish for light. He spoke, "Let there be light," and there was light. You are made in his image. You carry that same creative authority. Your words hold generative power. When you speak life over your circumstances, you're not just being optimistic, you're partnering with the creative force that spoke galaxies into being. Now, let me address something important here. Some people hear this teaching and they think it's about positive thinking or some kind of mental trick. That's not what I'm talking about. This isn't about denying reality or pretending hardship doesn't exist. It's about accessing a higher reality, the reality of the kingdom, which supersedes natural circumstances. It's about aligning your confession with God's already established truth rather than with temporary conditions. When Peter stepped out of the boat and walked on water, the storm didn't stop. The waves were still crashing. The wind was still howling. But Peter accessed a law that superseded the law of gravity. He operated from a different reality until he shifted his focus back to the storm and began to speak the language of fear again. Your words determine which reality you occupy. Now, let me tell you something that will transform how you see every challenge, every setback, every impossible situation in your life. The kingdom operates on a principle I call the law of precedent. What does that mean? It means that every miracle Jesus performed wasn't just for the person who received it, it was establishing a legal precedent for everyone who would believe after them. When Jesus healed the blind man, he wasn't just giving sight to one individual, he was establishing in the spiritual realm that blindness has no authority over kingdom citizens. When he raised Lazarus from the dead, he wasn't just bringing back one friend, he was declaring that even death itself must bow to kingdom authority. Every miracle in Scripture is a precedent, a legal ruling that says, this is what's possible in my kingdom. You see, in earthly legal systems, when a court makes a ruling, that decision becomes a precedent for all future cases. Lawyers reference it, judges cite it, it becomes established law. The same is true in the kingdom. Jesus didn't come to perform random acts of power. He came to establish what's legally available to all who are citizens of his kingdom. This is why he said, greater works than these shall you do. Not different works, greater works. He was saying, I've established the precedent. I've shown you what kingdom authority looks like. Now you operate from that same position. But here's where most people miss it. They pray as beggars instead of operating as citizens. They come to God saying, please, if it's your will, maybe you could possibly. No, you already know his will. He's established it through precedent. When you're facing sickness, you don't beg. You remind heaven of the precedent. You declare, by his stripes I was healed. That's established law in the kingdom. I'm not talking about arrogance. I'm talking about knowing your legal position. When you walk into a bank with a check that has your name on it, you don't beg the teller to give you money. You present what's legally yours and make a withdrawal. That's how kingdom citizens operate. Let me take you deeper. The kingdom doesn't just operate on precedent, it operates on the principle of alignment. You cannot access kingdom resources while living by Babylonian principles. You can't function in two kingdoms simultaneously. Think about it, you can't have a foot in both worlds. You can't pledge allegiance to two different governments. That's treason in the natural realm, and it's spiritual schizophrenia in the kingdom realm. Many believers are trying to live with dual citizenship. They want the benefits of the kingdom, but they're not willing to surrender the mindset of Babylon. They want heaven's provision while maintaining earth's value system. And they wonder why their prayers seem to bounce off the ceiling. It's not that God isn't listening, it's that they're speaking a language he doesn't recognize as kingdom language. Let me be clear. God responds to kingdom protocol, not religious emotion. You can pray passionately. You can cry. You can fast. You can quote scripture. But if your life is not aligned with kingdom principles, if your priorities don't reflect kingdom values, if your decisions are driven by Babylonian thinking, you're essentially asking the king to endorse a rebellion. And kings don't fund rebellions against their own government. This is why Jesus said you cannot serve two masters. He wasn't being exclusive, he was being accurate. It's functionally impossible. You'll love one and hate the other, or you'll be devoted to one and despise the other. The kingdoms are mutually exclusive in their operation. Now here's where this gets practical. When you're in the kingdom, your source changes. Your entire supply chain is different. In Babylon, you depend on your job, your connections, your education, your economy. In the kingdom, you depend on your king and his resources. The job becomes a distribution point, not the source. The economy becomes irrelevant to your provision because you're connected to an economy that doesn't fluctuate with Wall Street. This is what I mean by alignment. When you align with kingdom principles, when you prioritize what the king prioritizes, when you value what he values, when you invest your time, talent, and treasure according to his constitution, suddenly you have legal access to kingdom resources. Not because you manipulated God, but because you positioned yourself under the jurisdiction where those resources flow. Let me tell you something that revolutionized my understanding of provision. I discovered that God doesn't respond to need, he responds to seed. You see, when you read the Gospels carefully, you'll notice that Jesus didn't heal everyone who was sick. There were multitudes of sick people in Israel during his ministry, but he healed those who came, who pressed through, who positioned themselves in his path. The need was everywhere. The healing went to those who engaged the principle. The same is true with kingdom economics. Your need doesn't move heaven, your seed does. When you plant according to kingdom principles, when you sow into good ground, when you give not from poverty mentality but from kingdom consciousness, you activate a law. Not a religious ritual, but a spiritual law as reliable as gravity. Give, and it shall be given unto you good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over. That's not fundraising language. That's constitutional law in the kingdom. And here's what most people miss. The measurement you use determines the measurement you receive. If you give with a teaspoon, don't expect to receive with a shovel. If you sow sparingly, you'll reap sparingly. If you sow bountifully, you'll reap bountifully. This isn't about manipulating God into being your cosmic ATM. This is about understanding that the kingdom operates on principles. And those principles are impartial. They work for whoever works them. I've watched this principle transform communities. I've seen people who came out of poverty consciousness and entered into kingdom consciousness, and their whole economic reality shifted. Not because they learned to hustle harder, but because they learned to align differently. They stopped hoarding and started circulating. They stopped consuming and started contributing. They moved from being drains on the kingdom economy to being channels of the kingdom economy. And let me tell you something profound. This transformation didn't just change their bank accounts, it changed their identity. They stopped seeing themselves as survivors and started seeing themselves as stewards. They stopped asking, how can I get more? And started asking, what can I build with what I have? You see, most people today are living with a poverty mentality even when they have abundance in their hands. They're counting their resources instead of multiplying them. They're protecting their portion instead of expanding their influence. But kingdom citizens understand something revolutionary. Wealth is not just what you accumulate, it's what you circulate. Influence is not just what you possess, it's what you release. The early church became the most powerful economic force in the ancient world, not because they had the most money, but because they had the best distribution system. They created a network where no need went unmet, no gift went unused, no resource sat idle. While the Roman Empire was taxing people into poverty, the kingdom community was giving people into prosperity. While the world was hoarding in fear, the church was sowing in faith. And here's what history proves. Within a few generations, this small group of former fishermen and tax collectors had influenced the economic structures of entire regions. They didn't overthrow the system, they outloved it. They didn't fight the empire, they outgave it. They became so generous, so resourceful, so effective at meeting needs that even their enemies had to admit, these people have turned the world upside down. But notice something crucial. This only worked because they understood assignment. They didn't just give randomly. They didn't just throw money at every problem. They were strategic. They were intentional. They identified needs, assessed resources, and deployed assets with kingdom precision. They understood that generosity without wisdom is just waste, and compassion without strategy is just sentiment. This is what the kingdom economy demands from you today. Not just your money, your mind. Not just your resources, your resourcefulness. Not just your giving, your governing. You're not called to be a charitable reservoir. You're called to be a kingdom river. And I want to tell you something that's going to shake some religious foundations. God never called you to be a consumer. He called you to be a creator. The moment you reduce yourself to just being blessed, just being prosperous, just having more, you've missed the entire assignment. Look at Genesis again. God didn't bless Adam and Eve and then say, now go enjoy Eden, set up a nice tent, have a good life. No. He blessed them and immediately gave them work, dominion, governance. He said, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, subdue it, have dominion. Every single verb is active. Every instruction is about expansion, management, and influence. The blessing wasn't the destination. The blessing was the equipment for the assignment. And here's where we've gotten it twisted in the modern church. We've been taught to pray for blessing as if blessing is the goal. God bless my business. God bless my family. God bless my finances. But if you study the Hebrew concept of blessing times, Baruch times, it's not about accumulation. It's about empowerment for purpose. God doesn't bless you to make you comfortable. He blesses you to make you capable. Think about it. When God blessed Abraham, what did he say? I will bless you and you will be a blessing. The blessing had a connector. It wasn't a period, it was a comma. The blessing wasn't complete until it flowed through Abraham to the nations. His wealth, his influence, his name, it was all given with distribution built into the design. You see, a reservoir stores, but a river flows. And God is looking for rivers, not reservoirs. He's looking for people who understand that every increase is an opportunity for greater impact. Every promotion is a platform for greater influence. Every financial breakthrough is a doorway to greater distribution of the kingdom. And when you grasp this, when you really grasp this, it changes how you see everything. That new job, it's not just about your salary, it's about your access. That promotion, it's not just about your title, it's about your territory. That business breakthrough, it's not just about your account, it's about your assignment. You start asking different questions. Not how much can I get, but how much can I govern? Not what's in this for me, but who is this going to reach through me? When I was training young leaders, I used to watch them carefully during their first assignments. You could always tell who understood purpose and who was still trapped in the poverty mindset. The ones trapped in poverty would immediately ask about the budget, the salary, the benefits. But the ones who understood their assignment, they'd ask, who am I serving? What problem are we solving? How can I maximize impact with whatever resources I'm given? See, poverty makes you focus on the container. Prosperity makes you focus on the content. Poverty says, I need a bigger cup. Prosperity says, I need to become a better fountain. I remember a young man who came to me frustrated because his church wouldn't give him the title he wanted or the position he felt he deserved. He said, Dr. Munroe, I'm qualified, I've been trained. Why won't they recognize me? I asked him one question. What have you produced? He looked confused. So I said it differently. Show me what you've created that's so valuable. People can't ignore you. That's the shift, you see, from recognition to production, from position to contribution, from climbing to building. When you operate from prosperity, you stop waiting to be discovered and start creating things that are undeniable. You stop campaigning for promotion and start producing results that demand elevation. You understand that true success isn't about getting to the top, it's about lifting so many people up that you end up higher by default. Think about the most successful people you know, really successful. Not just wealthy, successful. They're not constantly talking about their achievements, they're talking about their mission. They're not focused on defending their territory, they're focused on expanding their impact. They don't hoard opportunities, they create them. That's abundance thinking. That's prosperity consciousness. When God looks at you, He doesn't see your current limitations. He sees your total potential. He doesn't judge you by where you are right now. He evaluates you by what's locked inside you. And here's what breaks my heart. Most people will die with their treasure chest locked. They'll take their songs to the grave. They'll take their inventions to the cemetery. They'll bury their books, their businesses, their breakthroughs. Why? Because they believe the lies about scarcity more than they believe God's truth about abundance. Listen to me carefully. Your value is not determined by the economy. It's not determined by your boss. It's not determined by your bank account or your credit score. Your value was determined before the foundation of the world, when God invested everything He had into creating you. You are the most valuable thing in the universe because you carry God's image and His ideas. Every time you say, I can't afford it, you're actually saying, God didn't think this through. God made a mistake with me. God didn't give me what I need. That's not faith. That's an insult to the Creator. Instead, you need to start asking different questions. Not can I afford this, but how can I create value that makes this possible? Not do I have enough, but what resources has God already given me that I haven't fully utilized? I've watched this principle work in my own life over and over again. When I started my ministry, people said, Myles, you don't have the connections. You don't have the funding. You don't have the platform. And they were right. I didn't have those things, but I had something more valuable. I had God's assignment. I had a message burning in my spirit. I had a willingness to serve. And you know what happened? Every time I stepped out in faith, resources appeared. Doors opened. Opportunities manifested. Not because I chased them, but because I was fulfilling my purpose. The universe, no, let me say it correctly. God Himself conspires to support your assignment. When you're walking in your divine purpose, provision follows. It has to. Because God never gives an assignment without providing the resources to complete it. That's His integrity. He's not going to call you to do something and then leave you stranded. The problem is, we're looking for the provision before we step into the assignment. That's backwards. Step into your purpose and watch provision chase you down. You see, every person who ever made a significant impact on this world had to make that leap. They had to step into the unknown with nothing but a vision and a promise from God. Abraham left everything familiar, his country, his relatives, his father's house, and he went out not knowing where he was going. The provision didn't show up until he started walking. Moses stood before Pharaoh with nothing but a stick. David faced Goliath with nothing but 5 stones and a sling. They didn't wait until they had the perfect resources. They moved when they had the right assignment. And here's what happens when you finally step into your purpose. The resources that were meant for you suddenly become visible. It's like they were there all along, but you couldn't see them because you were standing in the wrong place. You move into your assignment and doors start opening. Conversations start happening. Ideas start flowing. Money starts coming from directions you never expected. I've watched this happen over and over again. Someone finally surrenders to their calling, and within weeks, sometimes days, the provision begins to manifest. Not because God suddenly decided to bless them, but because they finally positioned themselves in the place where the blessing was already waiting. You're worried about the how. God is waiting for you to trust the who. You're calculating the cost. God already paid it. You're measuring your capacity. God is measuring your obedience. Let me ask you something. What assignment have you been running from because you don't see the resources? What has God been whispering to your spirit that you keep dismissing because your bank account doesn't match the vision? What burden has He placed in your heart that you've buried under the excuse of I can't afford it. Stop waiting for permission from your circumstances. Your circumstances don't give you assignments, God does. And when God assigns, God provides. But you've got to move first. You've got to step into the water before it parts. You've got to stretch out your hand before the staff becomes a serpent. You've got to throw the stone before the giant falls. Faith isn't believing God can. Faith is moving like God will. And that's why so many people never discover their true capacity. They're waiting for confirmation before they commit. They want the guarantee before they take the step. But the very structure of faith demands that you move in uncertainty. You step into the fog. You launch before you're ready. You speak the word before you see the evidence. Because here's what I've learned. Faith doesn't remove risk. It transforms your relationship with risk. It doesn't give you certainty. It gives you courage in the face of uncertainty. The person of faith isn't someone who never doubts. The person of faith is someone who acts despite the doubt. Think about it. When Jesus said to Peter, "Come," Peter didn't wait for swimming lessons. He didn't practice in shallow water first. He stepped out onto chaos. And yes, he began to sink when he looked at the circumstances instead of the one who called him. But here's what we miss in that story. 11 disciples stayed in the boat and never walked on water at all. Peter at least got out. You see, even failed faith attempts what comfort never dares to try. Even a stumbling step is still a step. Even a shaky beginning is still a beginning. And God doesn't judge you by your perfection. He measures you by your willingness to move. This is why I tell young people all the time, stop waiting for the perfect moment. Stop waiting until you have it all figured out. Stop waiting until you feel ready. Because if you wait until you feel ready, you'll wait forever. Readiness isn't a feeling, it's a decision. It's saying, I don't have all the answers, but I have enough light for the next step, and I'm taking it. Your destiny isn't waiting for you to become something different. It's waiting for you to recognize what's already within you and act on it. The treasure is already in the field. The oil is already in the house. The giant slayer is already in the shepherd boy. The question is, will you dig? Will you pour? Will you throw? Because here's what I've learned. The greatest tragedy in life is not death. It's living without ever discovering what you carried. It's standing at the gates of eternity with your music still in you, with your book unwritten, your business unbuilt, your family untransformed, your community unchanged. You see, when you die, you won't just take yourself to the grave. You'll take someone's answer. You'll take someone's breakthrough. You'll take someone's miracle. Because what's in you was never just for you. It was for a generation waiting on the other side of your obedience. I think about the inventor who never believed in their idea, the teacher who never stepped into the classroom, the entrepreneur who played it safe, the artist who let fear silence their voice. And I wonder how many lives remain stuck because someone didn't release what they carried. That's the weight of potential. It's not just personal, it's generational. So let me ask you again, but this way, who's waiting on you? Whose life will change when you finally say yes to what's inside you? What problem will remain unsolved if you don't step up? What transformation will never happen if you keep negotiating with your calling? You are not ordinary. You weren't mass-produced. You're not generic. You are a specific solution to a specific problem. You are a customized answer to a customized question. And the world is asking that question right now. But the answer only comes when you decide, truly decide to die to who you were so you can become who you're meant to be. This is your moment. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, not when circumstances align. Now, today, this hour. The seed is in your hand. The grave is before you. And eternity is watching to see what you'll do with what you've been given. Will you hoard it or release it? Will you protect it or plant it? Will you bury yourself or will you let yourself be buried so the world can finally see what God hid inside you? The choice has always been yours, and the harvest has always been waiting. There's a finality to that choice that we often try to avoid. We want to negotiate with the process. We want the harvest without the burial. We want the glory without the graveyard. But that's not how the kingdom works. That's not how life works. And deep down, you know it. You've been in the ground long enough. You've been hidden long enough. You've been waiting long enough. The question is no longer whether you'll be buried. You already are. The question is whether you'll stay dead long enough to come back to life. Because here's what I need you to understand about resurrection. It's not about restoration, it's about transformation. When that seed finally breaks open, when the shell cracks and the root pushes through, it doesn't become the same seed again. It becomes something entirely new, something that didn't exist before the burial, something that couldn't exist without it. That's what God is after in your life. Not a better version of who you were, but a revelation of who you've always been underneath. The you that fear covered, the you that disappointment disguised, the you that society tried to shrink, the real you, the one God planted before the world began, is what comes up out of that ground. And when it does, when you finally emerge from the season that tried to destroy you, you won't come back the same. You'll come back multiplied. You'll come back with answers for questions you never asked. You'll come back with strength in places you used to be fragile. You'll come back carrying fruit that feeds nations, shade that comforts generations, and seeds that outlive your lifetime. That's the promise of the burial. That's the guarantee of the ground. What goes down in weakness comes up in power. What goes down alone comes up multiplied. What goes down hidden comes up as a harvest the whole world can see. So I'm asking you one final time, what are you still holding on to? What are you protecting that God is asking you to plant? What gift, what dream, what calling are you clutching in your hand when God is pointing to the ground? Because here's the truth that will set you free. That seed in your hand has an expiration date. It won't last forever. Every dream deferred too long becomes a dream denied. Every gift unused becomes a gift atrophied. Every calling ignored becomes a calling silenced. Time is not neutral. Time is either your partner in planting or your accomplice in decay. You see, when you hold that seed too long, something happens to it. It begins to shrink. It begins to harden. It begins to lose its power to germinate. And the tragedy is not just what you lose, it's what the world loses. Because inside that seed you're holding is not just your future. Inside that seed is someone's healing. Inside that seed is someone's breakthrough. Inside that seed is the answer to someone's prayer. There's a child who won't be mentored because you won't plant your gift of teaching. There's a business that won't be started because you won't plant your entrepreneurial vision. There's a family that won't be restored because you won't plant your testimony of redemption. There's a community that will remain in darkness because you won't plant your light. Your seed is not just about you. This is why God is so insistent. This is why the Holy Spirit keeps disturbing your comfort. Because what you're holding is not just your potential, it's someone else's provision. What you're clutching is not just your dream, it's someone else's deliverance. So let me end where we began, with a question that demands an answer. Will you be a keeper or a planter? Will you choose the illusion of safety or the adventure of faith? Will you die with your seed in your hand, or will you live to see your harvest in the field? The ground is waiting. The season is now. The choice is yours. But understand this. If you plant it, you'll never regret it. You might struggle, you might sacrifice, you might suffer through the winter, but when that harvest comes, and it will come, you'll look back and wonder why you ever hesitated. Plant your seed, trust the process, and watch God do what only God can do. Turn your ending into your beginning, your death into your life, your seed into your forest.